Jeff, I heard recording in progress. Just let us know when we're live and we should begin.
We are ready to go.
Excellent. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Queen's Chamber Family Business Committee presenting today's topic, succession planning. We have our members with us on the committee, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But the purpose of today's meeting is to inspire and promote the major considerations that you must take into effect and take into account when planning the transition of your family business, either through the generations or to new ownership or even across to a new industry. Joining us today and really instrumental in putting together today's topic and discussions are, of course, the wonderful, enigmatic Jeff Gross. Thank you for your help. And then I see from the top, I have Mike Schul and Bobby Schul, Brothers United, and we'll hear a little bit about their journey. And today's meeting is designed to be interactive. So we're going to get through the content here with, we're going to move through it, but then we're going to get to kind of an open discussion so you can hear a little bit about certain stories that have come up as others have transitioned their businesses. We have Mark Berger. Thank you, Mark, for your help and support in getting to today. I also see sort of the dean, if you will, of family businesses and all matters, and that's Warner Babcock. So thank you so much for your guidance and support. If I missed anybody, please let me know, but that's what's on my screen right now. Okay, so we'll begin with a clip. If you don't hear the sound to this, let me know, start waving your hands, but we just want to put it into context as to how family planning of succession can go so wrong by using a little media from a show called Succession.
Can you give us a minute, please? Thank you. Hey, so you me.
I changed my mind, Kendall.
When? When exactly? Because it feels like you.
It's me. It's mainly me. But you, 3 years ago, you were still in the nut house.
Rehab. Dad, it's called rehab. And I'm in recovery.
It's all good. I'm just concerned you might be soft as yet.
Soft? Are you kidding? I year in Shanghai.
I hear you let the guy from the website trash talk you, and you just let him come.
It's not a website. And I was being professional.
I hear it played weak.
So thank you to Showtime. Was that Showtime? No, it's HBO and the magical providers of Succession. Succession is a show about a family business that makes it to the height of capitalism and winds up surviving through the generations. But as the older gentleman there, senior, is preparing for his succession, at the last minute, he decides in a very public way to subvert his succession plan and take it back for himself, making his son, the leader of the business, if you will, the person who's been leading underneath him, feel very dejected. So we have to prevent that for all of our family businesses at the Queen's Chamber. But a little humor to start us off. So today's agenda. So we're going to be going through the 5 forces influencing family businesses, because you have to consider these different constituencies as you think about proceeding through. And we'll hear from Warner on that. We also want to begin this with a comprehensive approach. So succession planning does not just happen on the fly, and in fact, it's a fluid process. It's an organic process, and it's one that should be done over time. There are some healthy conditions that you can promote to create the best possible scenario for your family business, and then also some outside considerations. And then we also have these personal stories, which I'm very excited about. I think that's going to be one of the best parts of our situation today. So I want to put this up, and then I want to ask Warner to come off mute and just orient us to these 5 forces of influence. But John Davis, a professor who I believe, has written many studies and books and has consulted with many family businesses, said when family businesses enlarge their lens to take into account all activities from the family enterprise, it allows for a more thorough, coordinated strategies and long-term continuity. So Warner, are you off mute?
I am.
Okay, great. Want to just take it over, and I'll pull up the different forces as you talk through it.
Okay, great. No, actually, if you could put them all up there at the same time, then that probably would make it the easiest and most efficient. That's great. Thank you. So the idea here is to have any family and their business recognize that there's some key influencing groups that make up the family business system, and to make sure that not only they're recognized, but there are clear roles and responsibilities that go with each different one. And then that they individually are very healthy. The healthier each one of those groups are before you go into a succession transition process, the better. Now, in the ideal world, it doesn't always happen, but your ideal is to try to work to make sure that they're clear about their roles and responsibilities, and that they are healthy in terms of being able to communicate, get along well, and deal with the various important issues that need to be addressed regarding, taking a company and a family through a new leadership and succession. So briefly, I'll just talk briefly about each one of these groups. And let's start with the family, the green circle, and that's really the foundation. If there's great family relationships and behavior and communications, and that system is very healthy, and they're pretty much on the same page about what what their goals are and so forth, that makes it a lot easier. And we know that, in fact, families and individuals are not going to always agree. So there's, a particular way of addressing that through what you call family governance. But there's got to be some way for them to come together and meet with some ground rules. And then some of those family members, if not all, actually have an ownership part of the business, and their rights as shareholders and their roles are a bit different than just being a family member. There's some responsibilities that come with that. And those include, communicating to the board what their long-term and near-term needs are and so forth. And most companies have boards legally, but, they're not always recognized or used, but whether you have an informal board or you have a legal board that's meeting every quarter, every year, and so forth. In fact, annually in the state of New York, your corporation is required to have an annual meeting and so forth. But this is where the shareholders can express to the board, usually through writing, some objectives and goals and so forth. The board then takes those and communicates those to the management based on what they feel as in their oversight role that is in the best interest of the shareholders, and will help the company too. And then the board also is responsible for choosing and selecting, the CEO, hiring, firing, and so forth, and that they are intimately involved in the, succession planning. And so they have to be very much into that, process. And then management, who really runs the business, takes a number of steps and decides on, the implementation and communication, and then overall operating of the business, and then maybe, evolution of executives and other management and the employees that need to be addressed, during succession planning. And then the last group is the constituencies, and that's the employees, that's the community, it could be banks, it could be any other parties that have some type of stake. And those are important because if they're not brought along, or they're suddenly surprised through lack of communication, or maybe the false expectations, that can cause some problems. So the old idea here is the 5 forces of influence is to take time and have everyone understand who's going to be involved in the transition process, that these five forces of influence actually exist, and that every step should be taken to try to make sure that each system, each group is healthy, and then they work together. And the communications start really with the family, go to the shareholders, then the board, then the management, and then off to the constituencies. In these relationships to the size of the bubbles and groups and so forth change, and so there's overlap that occurs and so forth. But it's just a basic, illustration of how one should be thinking about the system. So Chad, I think that hopefully covers it.
It sure does. It sure does. It gives us a framework to look at, because we look in family businesses. Everyone here on the call can attest that there are no 2 family businesses that are alike. And although we all share certain characteristics and certain things, we are all organically created from our own families. So to see this as a guide to how to think about it, it has changed how I think about my family business, to compartmentalize these groups and to never forget that each of them do exist, and they all have their own, for lack of a better word, rooms, that we must think about them in their own self, but then how they interrelate. And speaking of interrelating, comprehensive is the word that we've used to plan out a proper succession. And in order to do that, you can't just one day take in case of Mike and Bobby, 150-year-old company, and automatically put a succession plan in place. You have to strengthen each of these groups, and you have to set proper boundaries and make sure that roles and responsibilities have been clearly identified, so that not one group is merging into the other. You have to improve communication. Okay, so if you have family members that are not speaking, and I'm going to be very plain here and just say this: if you have family members that are not speaking and they're both involved with steering the business, you can't begin to do a succession plan. You need to arrange those things and have those things in order. And I know, easier said than done, but it's things to consider. Reducing confusion is something that our group really identified as, simplifying the process, increasing efficiency. So very, very important. So long-term view. So actually, this is kind of stems into our discussion that's going to be roundtable, where you'll hear about different examples. But the long-term view is something that I can definitely appreciate. I did not know that this is what was planned here at my family business for me, but this is certainly something that I think was in the works. So if you can, the best thing to do is to start early by identifying a candidate or candidates 5 to 10 years before that time is necessary for them to take over, because you have to get them adopted into the culture. You have to get them to be respected among the peers, family members, non-family members, all those constituencies. It can begin, as in the case of me, and again, I didn't realize it was happening, but it did, from the time you're raising young children and building your family. Now, you'll also hear examples of how, okay, well, we're past that. Okay, we're not having more kids. What do we do now? And you're going to hear about those examples too. But this is just sort of that long-term view. And you should really seek to have guidance from others. Doing this in a vacuum, selecting one person to be the end-all be-all by yourself is not advisable. You need to have a team and you need to hear about the pros and the cons and all of the implications that are on the screen there. And you must have a good reputation because this reputation becomes that successor's, right? So I can speak from experience that when I am stepping into a meeting, I'm not stepping into the meeting as Chad Callahan. I'm stepping into the meeting as Chuck and Charlie and all of those Callahan gents that came before me, and I carry that with me. So if you have a good reputation, then your successor will benefit from that and look to carry that out. So addressing family conditions. And these are really critical. We touched on this, but family culture within the business must require accountability from all people involved. You can't have any, and sometimes I say things a little too plain. You can't have slackers. You can't have people sitting around doing nothing that are part of the family business that don't have a purpose. We must refocus them and retool them. You will run out of family members, trust me. There is a limited number of family members. So take it as a blessing that if you have somebody that's interested to work for your business, take them and grab their interest, find out what sparks them, and create that into hard work. Address trust issues, okay? These are, very triggering. We all have them, but it could truly hinder the success of your long-term plan if you don't have good, solid trust. Everybody's above board and knows what everybody's agenda is. So get on the same page and make sure that you've established a core set of values. Do you have a mission statement that everybody buys into from the company and that the family all can buy into together? And then, of course, again, everything here is easier said than done. That's why it's a presentation. But if you have any negative issues, got to deal with them. You got to root them out and you have to confront them. Maybe not all at once, but have a plan in place and at least to identify what those issues are so that you can navigate. Business conditions are an entirely outside scenario, and it is very difficult to promote a succession plan if your business is unhealthy. How do you hand down a business if your revenue is in a precipitous decline? So you have to have a gradual transition. I can tell you from experience, during this transition that I'm still in the midst of here, things that have never happened before in my own professional life have occurred. And without having my dad here to help guide me, I would have probably trial and errored it and not done as well. But I had that guidance. So having that sound hand transition over helps you not only to ensure that the business will last, but it also will help to deal with those practical problems that come up during that time period and train your successor. So have a well-integrated plan to do this that focuses on mentoring, right? So it's not about doing it day one. It's about showing it day one and making sure that they have seen and been exposed to all of what you're giving them. Family governance. I actually want to welcome Warner back to the slide because I think this is such a critical thing, and I am still working on this in my own realm, admittedly. So Warner, would you like me to put up all the bullets?
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks. So family governance really is, a wonderful tool that has been developed over the years, and it really provides an ability for families to come together and discuss, key issues, their goals, objectives, and address conflicts and so forth, and also have an understanding about a number of other issues related to their role in the family business in terms of policies and so forth. And the governance is really about making decisions together. It sort of lays the foundation rules for how to discuss things, sometimes heated topics, so that, people are being, active listeners and they're getting along well. They may disagree, but it doesn't take it to the level where, people are really, being, unreasonably, aggressive and that sort of thing. And they're respecting others, and they're not interrupting and so forth. So there's certain ground rules, there's just a few of them that under family governance are important that to set early on. Another part is how decisions are made, whether it's a majority, supermajority, and it doesn't mean for everything. They could be majority for some topics and supermajority for others, but just, or maybe they want to move forward and they agree as a group that they won't do that until there's unanimity or at least a consensus. And a lot of families work on a consensus basis. But so I think that in that is also the most important thing, and that is the forum which the family governance can provide the meetings to educate family members about the 5 forces of influence, about the things that Chad is talking about today, and a lot of other key, topics about roles and responsibilities of boards, ownership, and what some of the legal rights are and so forth. So that's a very important part of family governance. And the other one is, the ability to know as a group when it's best to reach outside to have an independent consultant, advisor, or facilitator to come in and help the group get through some of the really critical, tough issues. And having that outside third party who's professionally trained to get through some of the more contentious issues can be very valuable. So within the family governance, you have that ability. And I would also like to say it's best to think about this as a process. It's going to change over time. They're coming out of it is going to be some agreements, some policies, and it's an evolution based on how the family evolves and how people mature when marriages occur or partnerships or whatever may occur that changes the composition of the family. Family governance has some kind of flexibility to it. So Chad, that's a really quick snapshot of family governance and its importance.
Perfect. And so difficult to really get it right, because you don't grow up in a household thinking governance structures, because it's mom and dad and then it's siblings and all of that stuff. And then when it translates into the business environment, you have to have these measures in place. It really does, and it can foster more growth. So let's continue on. Oh, sorry, Warner, I forgot the last process, which is always to embrace the process and the results. Okay. Considerations. I think this might be the final slide before we get to our roundtable. So, ownership conditions. It it doesn't come to everybody the same way, but owners are visionaries. Okay. We don't all start our family businesses. Some of us are great operators. Some of us are great tacticians. Some of us are just really good at Excel. But it really comes down to, we must, right, everybody knows Excel. We must be promoting a shared vision. Okay. That is how you will attract new family members, and those sitting in the corner not necessarily engaging to come out of the corner. And there's so many different considerations that can be thrown into the mix here, including tax and estate planning, and really building a joint decision process, so that things are done together and with cohesion. Corporate governance really is the structure that ensures all of that can flourish, right? So, if you are not necessarily thinking about how to employ governance structures, and also I think my last and trying to get out to your different constituents, then it will be difficult to foster a transition to the next generation, or to whatever, if you're even trying to sell your business. These are so critical to paving the way for success in the future, because we forget a lot of it's hinged upon us as humans, our own, what we know. No, I know how to do that, so I'll just keep doing that. That's not the right way to run a business into the future. You have to actually formalize those processes and take it out of just that one or two things that only you know how to do. Okay. All right. So best part of our presentation. And I've been hinting that we're going to be picking on people and throwing some things into light. I can't wait to get to these because they're really well thought out. I'll quickly touch on mine, which I think I hinted at in the long game scenario. So Plaza was founded by my great grandfather in 1916. And my grandfather came in 53, and my father came in 71, and then I came in 2009. And throughout that time, you know, growing up as a kid, I was always welcome to come down to the family business, you know, and I might have been scraping gum off of desks. That was fun, actually. I have good memories of that because they gave me this little can of freeze stuff that I would freeze it and then scrape it, come right off. But I was also seeing my dad in action. I was also seeing him work with the employees and treat them with respect and dignity. And he had this whole thing that existed outside the house, because it's difficult to look at your parents as business people when you're sitting at the dinner table doing your homework and then they come through and they're tired, whatever, it's late. Well, I was able to see him fresh and act and solve problems. And that always stuck with me. So when I went out into the quote unquote real world, and I did so in public accounting, and then investment banking, I realized that I was missing something that I had been exposed to, and it was calling to me. And that's how I made my way back here. Now this is a long-term approach. We're hoping to keep Dad here and until he's 150. But essentially, this is how they have done this here, and I think we could use Warner to help guide us and give us some additional feedback. But things are really progressing well, and if God forbid something needed to change today, I feel equipped that I would be able to take over the business and to continue it on. I'm going to I'll report back, when that happens. That's not going to happen for quite some time. But I will ask now us to switch, and we're gonna. I'd like a little context on why it's different, and then also what happened there. And we have the great and really good friends and really great producers of this content, Mike and Bobby Schul.
Hey everybody, I apologize in advance because my brother Bobby is on this, and I will try to refer to it, my father, as our father, because it is both of our fathers, but sometimes I might slip. I'm sorry for that. But similar to Chad's situation, it was our great-grandfather who actually didn't found the company, but worked for J.W. Hampton and then took over the company. And through the generations, it was passed down from one son to the next son, because there was only one son. And now there's two sons. And watching that clip from Succession and watching the episode, when I first turned it on and I saw that patriarch, Logan Roy, like my father resembles him, our father resembles him in that he has the gray hair and the gray beard and the sturdy features, let's put it that way, and just has a presence about him. But thankfully that's where it ends. And so part of that reason, though, is because in Succession, there's so many different family members vying for power and to be the successor. Whereas in the situation, there's two sons, my brother and I, and we're not really vying for succession. If anything, we're jealous of our sister, who is a school teacher out in California, that she got so far away from the family business when she did. But getting back to the dynamics, so there's two sons who will eventually take over the company. And I happen to be divorced with two kids. My brother is married with 4 kids. He is younger than I, but he started working for the company, the family business, right out of college, whereas I worked in a different industry prior to that. There's the fact that he's in the office every day doing operations and I'm doing sales. And so we have our different tasks that we do, and there are different leadership roles within the company. They're completely different, but by the same token, our father's tasked with, okay, what is the succession plan? And unfortunately, we did not start that succession conversation early enough, yet we're not too late with it. So as on one of the slides earlier, started 5 to 10 years in advance. Are we still on? This screen just went blank.
Can hear you.
Okay, I just can't. So our succession plan only started, quite honestly, because of the pandemic. And with mom and dad getting out of the office, it would have been much better to start it earlier, because all of those things that were talked about with the culture conversations and the business processes conversations, we're having them all now that we should have had earlier. Ultimately, and I'm sure many family businesses have the same probably view as our father did growing up. You know, who has time to communicate? We're too busy to communicate. We got too much work to do. We don't have time to communicate. Working nights, weekends, at the kitchen table, in the office, wherever it was. Like Chad was talking, scraping off gum. My brother and I, as kids, because we're dealing with importers and exporters, these government forms that had carbon paper in them. And so you had to take this form and you had to try to rip out the 4 pages of carbon paper all at once. Well, that was like our father calling us too soft if we couldn't get all 4 pieces of carbon paper out at once. And it was something like, all right, finally, you had wrists that were strong enough, you can do this. And it was a moment of pride, like this stupid little task, but it got you embedded in the family business long before you even knew that someday you were going to be having this succession conversation. So I think that, like Warner was talking about, there's no answer that fits every single company, but there is an answer for our company and there's an answer for every company. And that's why we are hiring a professional at some point. We're in the process of figuring out, okay, what can a professional bring to us? And are all 3 of us, my brother, my father, and I, willing to listen to that professional? But again, it just goes back to what we've talked about through every slide here: communication and early communication. Otherwise, we're kind of going to be lost. And one big conversation we're having now is the difference between ownership and employment. And is your salary based upon whether you're an owner of the company or not? There's many people who believe no, ownership is ownership, and whatever that percentage might be as far as the succession plan. And do you have to be employed by the company to be an owner of the company? That's part of the succession conversation as well. And I think I've spoken enough. I don't know if Bobby wants to chime in anything to add on.
No, I don't have anything to add on at this time.
Well, that was great, guys. And I think that the point is that, you know, everything that we presented and that we brought together and the lessons from the previous slides, those are all perfect scenario regimens. These are things to consider. And what you just heard was, hey, look, they got a pandemic and all of a sudden mom and dad needed to pull back and the brothers needed to step up. And now that structure, which wasn't necessarily in place, they had to figure out on the fly, and they did it. And the business is there and it's thriving. So something went right. But at the same time, as these gents think about the next generation and all 6 kids that are coming up the ranks, you know, they'll use that as a bit of an inspiration to say, maybe we'll do it this way next time. So that was great. Thank you, guys. And then I know that Lena was having some trouble log in, but we're going to go right to Mr. Berger, who actually, Mark, when you told us what was going on there, we were feeling for you because, you know, you've been doing it yourself, and why don't you take us through the whole thing so we can understand how the Plan B approach can work?
Sure. So, and Plan B does not stand for burger, but it does stand for what other plans you can have and how things sort of move forward. So just a little background, we're lock manufacturers here in New York City. I impress everyone by saying we're New York City's largest lock manufacturer. That's impressive until you get the corollary, which is that we're also New York City's smallest lock manufacturer, because we're the only one left manufacturing within New York City. And we're big on unique solutions and solving different problems that are out there. If you've ever heard that annoying alarm as you exit the subway system, instead of going through the turnstile, you go through the gate. We're responsible for the creation of that life safety system for the New York City Transit Authority, amongst many other products. But as a company, our strength has always been the fact that we can pivot and create new solutions, and it sort of fit the personality of my father and myself, which was to always be creative and come up and be responsive to customers and come up with solutions. That's going to be an important part of also planning your succession, that ability to pivot and also think about different things. Because as someone started mentioning about a 5-year plan, as we've learned over the last 5 years, a lot of stuff is going to happen that's going to change what your original plans were. Similarly, in family dynamics, a lot of things are going to change over 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or 5 years. So whatever plan you put in place, you have to revisit that because things are going to change. Everything is dynamic. There's no such thing as a long-term plan that goes according to every step that you've put in place. So in my case, a little bit different than some others. My father and I actually built this business together. He started it, so I am in a certain degree a successor, but he was in it for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years before I joined it. And when I joined it, we sort of refashioned the company. But we had a case of a strong founder and a strong leader whose identity, to a certain degree, became molded with the company and always saw himself as being part of the company and defining himself by that relationship. So while we could talk about succession, and I've been the president of the company since the 1980s, and he was the chairman up until his passing this February. There was always the belief that, yes, Mark is running the company, but there's always a chief at the top, and deference must be paid and should be paid for what he did and what he contributed and things like that into the company situation. Now, in trying to make sure that the company was continuing successfully, over the years, I realized that I did not have a strong number 2 within the company. I also have, from a family point of view, 2 daughters, neither of whom are coming into this business. And that's just because they've chosen different professional paths. So in planning for succession, I had to first plan for continuity. And that meant that over the years, I brought in different advisors to either be here on a daily basis or in on a couple of days a week, just in case something happened, to keep it going, to be able to plan for succession. So part of it is knowing what your own personal strengths are. And part of it is always planning for that B standing for that bus, the bus that can hit you. And as much as you're planning for succession, you have to make sure that continuity is there as well. And I wanted to just touch on one thing about family dynamics that has been discussed. And that is that as much as you think you understand family dynamics, nobody understands family dynamics. There's context, there's pretext, there's subtext, and you may have a conversation, but you may be saying something that may not be what the other family member is hearing. And you may be going down a path and thinking that something is working for the family. And then here 6 months, a year, 2 years later, that's not what the assumption that they're functioning under. Worse, they may never mention anything and create resentment. So what we did in our family, and I've got 2 sisters, and they were partners in the business as well, because my father believed everyone should be part owners in a family business and things like that. I had to recognize where they were. We also had a little complicated situation in that we had a former partner in the 1980s, and we did a financial, we planned for a public offering. We took in some debentures and things like that. So I had this small little group of very, very small shareholders. So I had to be very careful in administering the company to make sure that all those constituencies that were talked about in one of the earlier slides, I had to make sure that I was respectful towards them and recognized, even though they may have been infinitesimal owners, they were still owners, and I couldn't just run roughshod and do sorts of things and ignore what their interests were, even though some of them I hadn't heard from in literally 20, 25 years. But you've got to recognize those players as well as you're thinking about running your company and your succession plan, especially if you have key valued employees who may contribute. Let's say they're on the sales side, which in case they're the forward part of the company, may think that they are as important as anything. And then if you're planning succession and you're not communicating with them as well, you run the risk of a rainmaker walking away. So these are all factors that you need to keep in mind as you put together a succession plan, and not only having a succession plan, but a B succession plan as well. Thank you.
That was great. And thank you so much. You can't be too skimpy on the plans. Even though this is here, I'll be honest with you. With me, I also have my sister. I also have my brother. And I've got 3 kids, and they're years and years and years away from this. But I'm already after meeting Warner, I'm already starting to talk with them about it. And in fact, speaking of Warner, I thought we'd close this out because Warner, formerly and for many years, ran New York City's Family Enterprise Council, and I'd love to hear some other, what's a strange one for us, Warner, that you can give us context. What's something that's happened out there that would inspire future succession plans as we wrap up the event?
You're talking about it, maybe an example or?
An example, yeah.
So I think one of the interesting examples that come to mind is the family that really did an excellent job of coming together and instituted wonderful family governance, corporate governance, became very educated on shareholder rights and what roles and responsibilities each group had, and all those things that we talked about, it creating a healthy family business system. And with all that in place, for various reasons, it turned out that even with the family being well educated and growing up together and having close bonds, they ended up as a group having a situation where nobody in the family wanted to take over the business. And in that case, they were very fortunate that they did all this planning and put a lot of time and effort into setting up the different governance processes and educating everybody so that they could then lean on attracting outside board members and having them oversee the business, and a non-family member running the business for that particular generation. And there is interest by the next generation in taking a more active role and becoming employees and operators, management of the business in the future. So I guess what I'm saying is it's interesting. I mean, how these things unfold, you can't always predict, but if you have good governance and you have a healthy system, you can pretty much work through whatever ends up, being your unique situation to a point where it can be transferred to the next generation, and then the next generation can be continue on, not only as owners, but maybe management and so forth. So sometimes all this may lead to what I would refer to as a bridge generation, where the actual family is not operating or managing the business, but is set up so that they can come back in and do that. And there are some wonderful big examples of very large corporations that are family businesses. They're not public, where the next generation isn't ready or interested, or it just doesn't work out, but it's the business still stays in the family. And at some point they end up possibly thinking about the family business as part of a portfolio of holdings and redeploying some assets into other areas, whether it be real estate or something else that the next generation or future generations have a great passion for. So once you get your systems and your processes and your governance, communications, and everything up and running and healthy, you have the right people in place and independent directors and so forth, you can really take the these wonderful family assets that are jointly held and have them continue to the benefit of all parties. And it doesn't just require a family member to run it. So I think that's kind of an interesting example, and I hope that was helpful.
It was very helpful, because as new members come on, they may see a lifelong pizza, you have 5 pizzerias, but dad was smart enough to buy the real estate. Well, maybe the next generation comes in and says, well, guess what? We're a real estate company. We're not really a pizzeria. And
Right.
maybe they can bring it forward. So I think I get that loud and clear, and it's about inspiring others to come forward. So thank you to everybody. And I also wanted to I think we're going to close it out with my co-leader here. Mike has a few last things that he'd like to add, and then we're going to adjourn.
Yeah, just listening to Warner reminded me of these succession conversations are not easy. It's really a very, very difficult topic to bring up, because in reality, depending upon the age and the health of the leader of the company that you work for, there's the idea of, at some point, not just retirement, but death. It's a really difficult conversation, but it's such an important conversation, because not only has the succession conversation opened us up to other conversations about the business and then also about the family, but it also, I feel, and my brother, I think we feel the same way, that you can leave a business to your children and that's part of your legacy. But leaving a well-run business where there's communication and everyone's on the same page, or at least in the same book, and has the opportunity to get on the same page. And we don't agree on everything as it relates to succession or anything with this company, but we all respect each other enough. And I just can't, these succession conversations, as depressing as they have been at times, have really been eye-opening. So it's not something to prioritize the daily BS that we all go through in our companies over the succession conversation. It just has to happen. So Jeff, thank you for putting this meeting together. Chad and Warner, thank you for the leadership you've taken on these presentations. Bobby, thank you for not saying anything that contradicts me. And Mark, thanks for your feedback as well. If there's anyone else on the call who just wants to throw a few comments in or any questions, otherwise, like Chad said, we'll wrap it up.
I'll just add one thing about the discussions. Number one, if you're in a family business, do quarterly reports to the family. Just schedule them and let people know an expectation. Even if you're not planning a succession, just from a family point of view, have a scheduled communication that everybody knows about. The second is succession planning is like peeling an onion. As you've just said, you've got to be careful with each layer that you peel, but trust me, at some point you're going to cry.
On that note, I do have one funny thing to add before we go, because as a young whippersnapper coming from banking, I thought I knew everything. So I came in, and my dad and my grandfather, my grandma, they all welcomed me in, right? And there was this dean who had been here forever, not family member. And I said to them, I said, we should probably start talking about a possible replacement. Oh, don't upset her. So I had a conversation with this lady. I said, I want to, tell me what you'd like. I would like to get you a second in command, plan, do some succession planning. Well, she heard this and she quit. And and then everybody was upset with me because I screwed it up. But you see, it is to Bobby's point. These are very, very sensitive conversations. They deal with feelings and emotion and livelihood. So we know. But anyway, join us next time. We'll have another continuation of this. And thank you so much from the Family Business Subgroup.
Have a great day.
Bye, guys.